If you clicked on this video, chances are you've been manifesting your desire for far longer than you'd like to admit, but without seeing results. You keep hearing, just let go. But every single time you consider it, it feels like giving up on your dream life. And the fear of not getting what you want keeps you worrying, checking, spiraling, or just plain desperate. But that fear is exactly what's blocking your manifestation. And I've been fortunate enough to be taught a specific method I've used time and time again to dissolve my fears. And I've used it to finally let go of the fear of not getting my desire. I've used it to break out of that lack state without giving up on what I want, and I've seen it work on other people too. And this often allows them to see their desire come within days instead of months or years. You've probably come across success stories where people let go and then they suddenly see their desire manifest within hours or days. Now, how does this work? Most of the time, it's because they let go of that fear, that lack state. It doesn't mean that they stop wanting it or that they stopped caring about it. And no source teacher has ever told you to stop wanting it. In fact, Neville Goddard and Seth both say that desire is really important and can be used to manifest even faster. Think of it this way. You would never tell a parent who wants to manifest a good life for their child that they just need to stop wanting that. Or you'd never tell a sick person who's trying to manifest good health to just stop wanting to be healthy. That's crazy. So since thoughts create reality, what happens when these people let go is they go from thinking negative thoughts or lack thoughts to positive thoughts or just completely neutral thoughts. Both would be fine. So they'll go from thinking thoughts like, what if I can't get that dream job? Or what if I can't make more money? Then everything is going to be a disaster because I'm not going to be able to retire on time, or I'm not going to be able to feed my family. Or they'll go from thinking thoughts like, what if I can't manifest my dream person? But I'll never be happy. I'll never get to get married and start a family that I want. To thoughts like, oh, everything's going to work out for me. I'll be fine. Or completely mundane everyday thoughts. And I'll explain what I mean in a minute. But you know that those thoughts of negativity are putting you in the exact opposite state of where you want to be to manifest. And you might be thinking, okay, yeah, but I'm visualizing, I'm scripting, I'm affirming, I'm doing all these techniques. Sure, you might be visualizing, scripting, affirming for some amount of time a day. Even if you do that, how are you spending the other 12 hours that you're awake? What are you thinking and feeling at that time? If you're thinking these negative thoughts, even occasionally, then you're just undoing all the work you put in to doing all these techniques. Now, imagine if you drop all that negative thinking about not having it, about what you're going to do, or how you can cope with life if you don't get what you want. You're going to go back to living your life in a more natural, normal way. And that's where you start really thinking exactly the way you'd think if you had your desire already. So I'm going to explain. Regardless of whether or not your overall life is like good or bad, it really doesn't matter. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're manifesting SP. If you had your desire, your SP, you'd still say be enjoying Sunday brunch with your friends. And so throughout the week, you might be thinking thoughts like, what am I going to wear to that? How am I going to get there? Is parking going to be a nightmare? Should I take the train instead? Or you'd be wondering how the show that you're watching is going to wrap up the season. You just go back to thinking exactly how you would be thinking if being single wasn't an issue anymore. And this is exactly how you'd be thinking if you had your SP. You'd still be going to those brunches. You'd still be figuring out parking. You'd still be thinking about your shows. And that's what I mean when I say that the thoughts you'd have when you have your desire and the thoughts you'd have when you don't have your desire, but you've properly let go in a healthy way, they'd be mostly the same. And you're just going about life normally. Not in a state of lack, not spiraling, not worrying. Because we all know that manifesting is about being the person that you want to be in here and then having the physical world reflect around you. That if you think from the state of having what you want, you're going to get it. And since some of you have asked me to give other examples, I'll just cover them briefly here. So say you're manifesting your dream job. If you had your dream job now, you'd still be thinking ordinary thoughts like, oh, I should really schedule that oil change that I'm overdue for. Or what am I going to make for dinner this week? Or if you're a teenager manifesting a physical change like being taller, you'd still be thinking thoughts like, oh, Mr. Geller assigns way too much math homework. Or I really need to get started on my term paper. You just wouldn't be thinking too much about your desire at all. Have you ever noticed that when you overthink something or you try too hard at it, you tend to get a worse result? Like, for example, if you are overthinking dancing and you're on the dance floor thinking, okay, left foot here, right foot here, do I look too stiff? Am I doing this right? You're just going to come off looking robotic and not like in the fun robot dance way. Or if you're thinking about like riding a bike or playing an instrument too much, it's just going to make it harder for yourself to do it really well and smoothly. I know you've all experienced this before, where when you let go and when you really relax and you stop like hyper focusing on getting a good result, you actually start to perform better. My absolute favorite manifesting quote of all time is, you get what you concentrate upon. I actually love it so much. I got it engraved on my hydro flask that I bring with me everywhere. I don't know if you can see it. It says, you get what you concentrate upon. There is no other main rule. But basically, you get what you concentrate upon. And so if you are concentrating on fear and you're being fearful about not having your desire, then that's what you're going to continue to manifest. Okay, so you might be wondering, how do we deal with that fear? And I do have a method I want to share with you. And I also want to share with you a success story of mine where I used that to dissolve one of my fears. And then I basically got better than my manifestation within a few days. And to give credit where it's due, I learned this from the Success Center's Dreams Intensive course, where they basically teach you how to use dreams to manifest. But essentially, the method is this. So they would tell you to pick a fear and then pair up with somebody, anybody, but you can really do this alone. And you tell that person your fear. And then they say to you, so what? And then you answer that question. And then they again say to you, so what? And you keep answering that question until you basically peter out and until you realize like, oh, you know what? At the core of it all, it's not that big of a deal. And like I said before, you don't really need another person to do this for you. You could just ask yourself, so what, in your head until you finish answering that question, and do that for however long it takes until you get to the end. And every single time your fear comes up, do that exercise again. So what I got out of this when I did these exercises was I was able to realize that even if every single one of my really crippling biggest fears happened, I would still be able to live a happy, productive, satisfactory life that still would be filled with meaning. I could still live a life that was filled with happiness and joy. And one of the fears that I had used this on was a couple of years ago, I had a relative of mine who has a chronic condition that she's had for a very long time, like over a decade. Her medications stopped working, and at this point, it seemed like she needed open skull surgery. So this is surgery that they'd have to actually open up her skull. And she's fairly older, and it's not a 100% survival rate. I mean, basically no surgery is. But essentially her doctors were like, yeah, if these meds don't work for you anymore, then your last chance is this surgery. You should do it. And some of my other relatives who were doctors were pressuring me to get her to do it. So she was scared. I was scared. She was like, I really don't want to have a surgery that is this invasive. I am not sure if I'm young enough to be able to recover from this quickly. Who knows? There's a 3% chance that things are not going to go well. And for me, I was thinking, okay, what if things go wrong? I can't possibly live without this person. I don't think I would be able to cope if she died. And so basically day in, day out, I was just having these intrusive thoughts of, okay, what do I do if the worst thing happens? It was just honestly terrible. A lot of crying happened. But anyway, I knew that from a law perspective, I had to confront my fear. I couldn't just keep running from it, because I knew that, of course, my thoughts create reality. Of course, what I dwell on and what I feel is what manifests. And day in, day out, I'm just feeling dread and terror all the time. So I knew that I had to confront this fear. So then I used this so what method. And I really sat down and I thought to myself, what would happen if the worst case scenario happened? And it only took me a few minutes to realize, okay, even if I did lose her, I've lost relatives before, I would still be able to go on. As horrible as it sounds, I would grieve for a very long time, but I would still be okay with it. It didn't mean that I stopped caring. It just meant that I was not spiraling about it every single day anymore. And the craziest thing happened, which is days later, she just called me up and she was like, okay, it turns out I don't need the surgery anymore. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's not possible. She was like, oh, the men's working again. And I'm like, what? Okay. So for those of you who don't know, I went to medical school. So I have studied pharmacology and biochemistry in pretty intense detail. And so I was like, it's not really possible for the meds that you were taking to just suddenly start working again. And it made absolutely no sense, except the law. From the law perspective, the way you'd explain this is that my worrying about her, my constant baseline level of worry that her quality of life was not great and the meds would stop working eventually, just escalated slowly until it hit a threshold where stuff hit the fan, basically, and she needed the surgery. And then when I actually was able to deal with my fears and let go properly, and the negative thoughts just plummeted, is when physical reality reflected good news again and everything went back to normal. And to this day, she still hasn't had to have that surgery. She's fine. But basically, my favorite Neville Goddard quote, feeling a state produces that state. So when I stopped worrying about her health is fine. When I was worrying about her health was not fine. And so with you, if you're feeling lack, you're going to get that. So it's my favorite Neville Goddard quote says, feeling a state produces that state. So if you're worrying about something, a problem that's going to happen, then you're probably going to manifest that problem. Or if you're feeling a lack state, then you're going to feel that. If you're feeling unloved or single or unemployed, then you're going to get more of that. Not only that, if you're expecting something then you're more likely to manifest it. Because like expectation is just faith in something unseen, something that is not here yet. So if you expect lack, if you expect not being loved, if you expect to stay short, or you expect to stay how you don't want to be, then that's what you're going to continuously manifest getting more of. So I'd encourage you to keep reminding yourself of this fact, so that when you catch yourself thinking from a lack state, or feeling from a lack state, or expecting or planning for more of what you don't want, then change it. Because at the end of the day, no one controls how you think and feel except you. Now, letting go also means looking at your actions in a 3D. So are you doing things that don't benefit you at all? Things that you wouldn't do if you already had your desire. For example, are you checking social media day in, day out for what your SP is doing? Or are you reading about growth plates if you're trying to manifest being taller? Are you reading about diet strategies if you're trying to manifest losing weight? Or are you doing more research into skincare if you're trying to manifest clear skin? You wouldn't be doing these things if you had your desire, if you already had your SP, if you're already tall, or your ideal weight, or if you had clear skin. And of course, there's a caveat here. I said, are you doing things that aren't benefiting you in any way? Of course, if you still have a job, but you're manifesting being wealthy to not have to work anymore, or you're manifesting a different job, then of course you would still keep going to that job because it still benefits you by helping you pay the bills. I'm talking about obviously unhelpful things like checking the 3D, things that make you feel worse or more helpless. So I feel like everyone has heard of or known someone who stopped looking for a partner, or who started focusing on themselves, their career, started prioritizing their health, their friendships, their family, etc. And then suddenly their soulmate appears out of nowhere. And a lot of times it's because that's exactly what they would have been doing and focusing on the 3D if they had their partner ready. They'd be going to the gym, they'd be hanging out with their friends and family more. They're choosing to focus on these things that give them meaning, or like a feeling of agency or control, of happiness. And since feeling a state produces that state, of course more good things happen to them, like meeting their partner. And sometimes explicitly taking a break from manifesting something can make it arrive even faster. So Seth talks about this. And for those of you who don't know, Seth is basically like what I would describe as a higher self, or like a spirit who has lived many human lives. He was channeled through someone named Jane Roberts in the 60s and 70s. And he basically wrote what I think are the best books on manifestation. So he's responsible for essentially starting the New Age movement. And he coined the phrase, "You create your reality." He basically wrote 30 books on manifesting. And they're really long. So they're not like the really short 1 to 3 hour books that Neville wrote. No hate to Neville Goddard. I love Neville Goddard, but Seth just went into a lot more detail and was just a lot more comprehensive about every facet of manifesting, including the science behind it. But anyway, Seth has said that it's good to take breaks from thinking about the problem, that you want to withdraw your attention from it sometimes because it allows the problem to unknot, as he said. And by stepping back a little, you will allow your inner self, or your higher self, which speaks to you through your subconscious, to set up a bridge of incidents and to basically whisper to you through intuitions, guidance, or inspired action to walk across it. Now, he specifically said, you want something, you dwell upon it consciously for a while. You consciously imagine it coming to the forefront of probabilities, closer to your actuality. Then you drop it like a pebble into framework 2. Forget about it as much as possible for a fortnight, and then do this in a certain rhythm. And you can think of framework 2 as like a mental reality where everything exists. It's basically the world from which our 3D physical world is born. So sometimes I tell people you can loosely think of framework 2 as what we call in the Neville Goddard community the 4D. Seth also described a whole bunch of exercises that we can do to manifest throughout his books, and usually he'll specifically say to not do this for any longer than 10 to 15 minutes, and some of them he says don't do them back to back next to each other. And the reason he gives is if you push yourself that hard, then you inevitably start to compare what you have now with what you want. And for most people, that just makes them feel bad. That just makes them think about how they don't have it or focus on more lack. And it's just demoralizing, which is the last thing that you want to be feeling from a manifestation perspective. And he was a really big proponent of leaning into or following what makes you happy. Like, do things that make you happy. He says that we're not here to suffer. We're not here to go without. We're here to learn how to get what we want. We're here to basically be able to learn how to create responsibly because we're essentially gods in training. So work through your fears using that so what method until you realize that you will be okay no matter what. And you'll always find a way to create a happy life for yourself, regardless of what happens. And have trust that good things will come, whether that's from the universe or from God or whatever it is that you believe in. Know that things will always work out for you, and then that's what you're going to get. That's good expectation, and expectation is one of the most powerful triggers for the arrival of your manifestation. It's basically faith in action. Worrying is faith in a bad result, which is the exact opposite of what you want to do. Now, if you're finding that you're worrying a lot, here's a video I made about using a law to overcome anxiety in general. And if not, YouTube thinks you'll like this video. Thanks for watching and happy manifesting. Bye!